And once again, we are here on Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is Robyn Jones, MSN, RN, CDN, DHA, CM. Nurse Jones, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today. There's so much to talk about. You are a nurse in the day and you are a producer at night.
Yes.
What a busy combination.
Yes, it is. It's an amazing combination, and people really are amazed how film and nursing marry well together. So it's an exciting combination for me.
Yes, one thing that really caught my attention in your video is how compassionate you as nurses are working around COVID victims, exhibiting that professionalism, a smile on the face, despite of the dangers that you are faced with, the dangers that could predetermine your death in a matter of weeks, but you still holding a smiling face. Tell me what that is really like, to be there in the presence of death. You know these people are going to die, and there's nothing that you all can do about it. It doesn't matter what. This is a little bit different than the normal nurse job or even a doctor's job. How do this really resonate within that compassionate side of a human being to another?
That's an awesome question that you're asking. And it's very hard to answer because as nurses and working in the healthcare field, we've always had a plan of care, so to speak, the answer. So if someone comes in with high blood pressure, diabetes, a cancer diagnosis, we have treatments that have proven to work and help, make the treatment as far as solving the problem. In some diseases, as you know, we're still in the scientific phase of trying to, cure those diseases such as cancer. But when COVID came along, it was totally devastating for the healthcare field, also the country, and we wasn't prepared for it. So as nurses, and doctors, you take an oath, do no harm. We go in with the best intentions to try and educate and treat patients and, ultimately send them to rehab or send them home. So when COVID came about, it happened so fast, we were in the treatment mode. As far as the mental health piece, as you know, it hit America in the middle of it. You didn't realize the trauma, the impact it had on us mentally until we got midway through it. That's why it's been so many programs implemented, meditation, yoga, all kind of counseling's been set up for people because even working from home, it's been traumatic for people. But as a nurse going in, I can honestly say from talking to a majority of healthcare providers, they never at any point felt like we didn't have a handle on this as far as the cure was coming. But as time went on and the numbers went up, this is a whole new arena for the healthcare team because nurses have died, physicians have died, many patients and frontline workers in the grocery store and different specialties have died as well. So it's very hard to go to work every day. Not that you don't want to go, because you hoping this day might be the day that the cure is found. Right. So you want to be on the pulse of that and you want to be contributing to that. And that's why so many healthcare workers that can continue to work have worked the whole tour. And we've had others that have gotten sick, some that mentally cannot handle this capacity because we're not getting the counseling that maybe other professions are getting because there is no time for a lot.
I want to pause there for 3 seconds just to show what's really going on in the backgrounds of this COVID-19.
I don't think people will ever be able to grasp what New York was unless they were there. To walk down the ER and see stretchers in the hallways, and you don't know if patients are alive or dead.
It took a couple of weeks to realize how people presented. What you found out is that you can predict who was going to die.
And I'm not talking about just nurses, I'm talking doctors, I'm talking environmental staff, case managers, social workers, people out because they're sick with this. So my fear was, am I next?
A lot of those nurses will die from this because they do not have the appropriate equipment. And then came wow, we were the most trusted profession. We thought we were the most loved as well.
For Black people, two pandemics collided. On May 25th, 2020, the Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd.
All of this stuff has been going on for decades. The only difference is that it's being filmed.
It is very difficult to deal with the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. We've all had to face the difficulties that led up to this movement.
People do not realize how mentally and physically exhausted the profession is.
Mental health for me right now is hidden behind a smile and a happy face.
I'm quick to tell people, oh, you need to go see somebody. You know, they got medication for that. And meanwhile, I'm sitting here suffering in silence.
So you were saying, Robyn, that people just don't seem to understand what COVID is all about. And we have a nation right now that, believe it or not, are divided over this issue. There are parents who don't want the kids wearing masks because they believe they deserve to wear masks. It's not the right thing to do. There are those who have the political and some of the evangelical beliefs that wearing a mask is the wrong thing. They wasn't born to wear a mask. And you have half the nation is for the vaccine and is cooperating and taking the vaccines. And we have another half, which I believe because of political interference from the get-go, is behind the whole concept that they shouldn't wear a mask. People in the Caribbean nations, and this is a fact, refuse to take the mask because it's going to mess with their mental DNA, and they believe it's a conspiracy. So they don't even believe the virus is real, even though people are there dying with the same virus. And this is a bad place to be in. Even the Prime Minister in St. Vincent had his head cracked open, his skull cracked open, because he wanted to make it mandatory that everyone wears a mask. So in a world like this, how do we best convince, I want to use that word convince, the public at large, the essentials and the importance of wearing a mask to protect not only themselves, but to protect others? What is your view on that, nurse?
I think that's an interesting point you're making, because what I found being in the healthcare field for over 30 years is that a lot of times people don't believe it will happen to me until it happens to them. Even when you think about diabetes and high blood pressure, people will eat and drink and do the things they want to do. And once they get diabetes, you go through this denial. And it's like education has been there for years, but you may have taken the stance that it's not going to happen to me, or that only happens to older people, or it only happens to Black people. So when it happens to you, then it's sometimes a little too late. And I think what I've seen in the COVID arena is some of the same attitudes and mentality. Some people are strictly against the vaccination. They don't want to wear a mask. They don't feel like you need to be cleaning up behind yourself because they haven't been doing it and they haven't gotten sick. But then when they do get sick, or a family member gets sick and actually dies, then they want their vaccination right now. And we've even had people within the ICU environment and in the hospital that want their vaccination right now. Now I want my vaccination right now. And it's like, you have got to get better first before you can have your vaccination now. We got to go through this process now. So a lot of times people are coming on board, but the numbers that we see now are the unvaccinated that's coming into the hospital that's dominating right now. So it's an indicator, if you look at the science, that people that are getting the vaccination, yes, some of them are still getting reinfected. Yes, that we have data on that. However, the majority is people that did not take the vaccination. So when you compare that, you say, hey, it must be something in that vaccination that's protecting some of us, because now the people that are going in are people that have decided they're not going to take the vaccination, but now they want it. And some of them don't live to get it because they're so sick. So a lot of things that have come along that have been something that has affected the whole community and country, such as when HIV came in. A lot of people didn't believe that that was real. And then once they got sick or they saw someone actually die from it, then they started saying, well, maybe this is true. Maybe it's not a conspiracy. Maybe it wasn't created by the government. So I think all I can say as a nurse that we continue to educate, share the science. And most of the nurses that I am affiliated with, that's all we're doing is answering questions, sending links to people and trying to help them to understand and see the numbers. And then seems like every other house has experienced COVID death, whether it's a neighbor, a classmate. So it is real stuff. And I tell them, if you still, unsure about it, talk to someone who's lost someone with COVID. Not someone that I know, but someone you may know or that's in your community. That way, they know that you're not just trying to sell them something.
Right.
My job is just to help educate people, because it will sooner or later, you will have to deal with this if you don't protect them.
Right. Rumor would have also have it that in the hospitals, it was this imbalance when it comes to ventilators, that some people were privileged and other minorities were not privileged to have access to ventilators. Like it was some kind of preferential treatment of whom should go on a ventilator and those who shouldn't have access to it. What is your look dealing with COVID patients one-on-one? Do you saw any inequality surrounding that statement?
As far as that, I cannot speak on that. The one thing I do know that a lot of people did not go to the hospital right away because they feared that they would not get the proper care. So sometime when people did go to the hospital, some hospitals were so full, you could not even get admitted there. They pretty much would send you back home, or they would send you to another area where there was hospitals that had the equipment that you needed. As far as, a bias in that, I don't have any data on that.
Okay, were there any particular class of people who had that fear that if they go to the hospitals, they would not have fair access to equipment? Is there any specific race or anything like that?
I feel like more African American, especially everything hit when Black Lives Matters hit as well. We had COVID. And so we as a people, we were afraid that we would not be treated equal. And people that might be on transplant and have different kind of, they're going to be organ donors. They were afraid that maybe they wouldn't do everything for them, and so with all the discrimination in the country, those are things that are real to people. And they're like, I'm going to stay home as long as I can. But then when they got really sick, it was really bad.
But I'm glad you touched that, because in your video, you had mentioned that it was a struggle dealing with the George Floyd's case and COVID. It was like everything just came down on one, surrounding the inequities of the minorities. And it was a difficult time, a different period that you were going through, or nurses were going through, matter of fact. How difficult was it seeing the unfair treatment of massacres towards Black people, not just George George Floyd's case, because this is just a needle in the haystack. This is something that happened continuously. But
Absolutely.
if not for the goodness of cameras, it just gets swept under the carpet and goes unnoticed. A next black person die and that's it. Nothing
Right.
comes out of it. His case actually popped the eyes open to the world at large, right? And it's still going on, but they're all playing it down, right? But with that ton of weight coming down of, I want to use the word equal but segregated, so to speak. I don't know if that's the right choice of words, because that's how it seems to me. We may look equal in one way, but we're segregated in the next. There was a cop who caught on camera once. He pulled over a white lady and she said, "Please, my hands are up, don't shoot me." He said, no, we don't shoot white people. We only kill the blacks. And he got fired from his job for that. So they are a set with that mindset. Still, I'm not saying that the entirety of the police forces are like that. I don't believe it. But I believe on every unit out there, there is one bad cop with a bad intent and hiding under the good uniform of the police forces. And that's a bad thing. I think captains and those who are in charge of those units should get rid of those people. But getting back to my question, how complicated it really was to deal with that, because this is a lot going on. It's death right in your face with COVID patients, and it's death through inequality, black people just getting killed. You, a compassionate person that's sworn to show mercy in times of need, how difficult was that for you and your other colleagues to deal with?
It was very challenging because on one hand, you have COVID going on and you still got to function, do your job, try to stay safe and get back to your family safe if possible. Some of the nurses, they stayed in hotels, they stayed in their cars just to protect their family from not being infected with COVID. However, the kids were separated, from their friends with COVID, but some of them were having some interaction. And then we had all of this discord with Black Lives Matters. Everything was going on at one time. And like I have had conversations with people in the last week, these kids are finally going back to school and they're coming together. There will be conversations about what happened because it's not over. And they didn't get a chance to vent how they felt. But as parents, we were afraid that, it would be our child next. And the reason that this was so powerful during COVID time is that people were home, they were watching more TV than ever. So they got a chance to really digest what went on and what's been going on. Because sometimes, we're in our own little bubble. We're taking care of our kids, we're taking care of our parents, we're married, and we don't have a lot of time to digest stuff. We just hear bits and pieces.
That's correct.
But having the opportunity to be working from home, and people, even the kids were home, they saw it. So therefore, it really resonated, not with just African Americans, but everybody. And that's why the marches were so powerful when you saw all races coming together saying, this is not
Beautiful.
right. Yeah, this is not fair.
Yeah, one thing I want to ask, and this seems to be a battle now between kids and parents, and even the schools. Kids now are getting the virus and catching the virus more easily now than even the adults. While in the beginning, it was the opposite way around. And there are those kids who genuinely, sincerely want to take the vaccine, who want to wear a mask. Their mothers are telling them you're not wearing a mask. The school are emphasizing on the fact you should wear a mask. In a rambling world like this, and as a teacher also, how would you send a word of advice to parents? Because the problem now stems and lies with the parents. What word would you want to say to the parents? Not to take away anything about their constitutional rights. I understand that. But this is nothing to do with a constitutional right. This is more a humanitarian right, a moral issue, an ethical issue. How would you deal with that?
it's so important that we realize that we are responsible for our children. Those are our babies. And as a healthcare provider, when you see all of these children and babies admitted with COVID, sometimes it's because their parents don't agree with what the science is saying to do. That child now has to deal with the consequences of your decision, because we have a responsibility to educate ourselves. We don't know everything. So when COVID hit, even my mom, she's almost 80, she started studying, and she was like, soon as she could take her vaccination, she did, because she knew she was in a very high risk. Even before the science was completed, she made a decision that, look, I've had some lung issues, and I know I don't want to leave here, because I'm just stubborn. And so as a parent, my grandkids, they go to private school, and they've been in school the whole time that COVID was going on. And for a nurse and a grandmother, I really struggled. I prayed, but I believe in the science and I believe in God. So I knew that they would be okay. And they constantly say, Nene, I'm wearing my mask, I'm washing my hands, I'm washing my bag. And I told them, those are the things that's important. We had to slow down, and we have to protect our babies, because we don't know the answer to the question. Until this is solved and cured, we have to always be in a proactive position, not reactive, because we don't want our children to die because we believe in something that we truly don't understand. The proof is there, and these children, they see death. And that's the thing for me. If you talk to your child, talk to your children. Don't just give them directive. Ask them, how do you feel about going back to school with COVID? Yes, we all have a level of fear, but if they put on their mask and they follow the guidelines the best they can, then these kids can get back some form of normalcy, and then, some joy in their heart, and take away so much of this fear. But we as adults, we set the example. We set the example. So my grandkids, through the grace of God, are doing okay in school, but they're wearing their masks. And yes, it gets tiring. They tired of wearing it, but they know, they see what's on the news, because they had an opportunity to be home in between and see all the things that they have been missing. Kids are watching news back to back, just like adults. So when they see those numbers go up, and they see kids they're on ventilators, and some of them are not coming out. But we as parents, we have to do the best we can, follow the science until we have the answer to the question. So I just urge parents to get educated. If they don't understand, keep asking questions until you get understanding. Because when you think about the ventilator and the vaccination, because my grandkids are between that parameter where they can't be vaccinated yet. So, that's scary for me, but I trust science that sooner or later they're going to say, it's your turn, and then we'll be ready to get them vaccinated. And just understanding that with anything that we take, you may have some side effects. I understand that. It's like if you take a Tylenol, or you take your insulin for your diabetes, or you take your blood pressure medicine, there are going to be some side effects. But you have to look at the benefits that outweigh, all the disease itself. So it's just important to look at the benefits of this vaccination, yes, and then look at the numbers now. So I just want parents to be parents, because if anything happened to these kids, they look at the parents and say, why was your child out at 3 a.m? You have a responsibility.
Absolutely. What about those in the church who have the religious philosophy that I am God, I can't be touched? Now, bear in mind, nurse, this virus does not discriminate.
Exactly. Exactly.
It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. And sometimes God allowed the Christians to get things, or bad things happen to Christians. That doesn't make them bad people. What advice would you want to give them briefly? Because we know that there are those who are religiously stubborn. I ain't taking nothing. My life is in God's hand, and so forth. And they do come down with it. So just next 3 minutes, give your rundown on that.
Well, I've had this conversation with people. God created us all, and he created professionals for us. So if you say you believe in God and he's going to protect you, he made the scientists that created the vaccine. Look at who's creating things. And if you look at the data, you can see ministers that have passed. You can see people that just say, I'm not going to do do it have passed. If you go to war with nothing on, you're possibly going to get killed because you have nothing to protect yourself. So I feel like as a nurse and as just a mother and a grandmother, if there are things in place, just like when the seatbelt controversy, everybody was, didn't want to wear a seatbelt. And I remember that time when we had cars that you bought and the seatbelt just came across you, whether you wanted it on or not. And it's like now, finally, we to a place where you're going to get a ticket if you don't wear your seatbelt because we want you to try to not die if you have get in a car collision. So when you look at this vaccine, to have our government to try to mandate and tell us what we're going to do, that's where we're at because they're trying to save the country. They
Absolutely.
don't want, they're like, what else can we do but try to make people take this because they're not understanding the risk in it. But like I say, if you talk to people that have lost family members and friends, it would change your perspective. And I can be very transparent with you. I was waiting to take the vaccine. I was waiting on more science. And then we had different leadership at the time. And I felt like I couldn't see the numbers, the true numbers, because some things stopped going to the CDC based on our prior government. Mm-hmm. But I actually had the opportunity to have one of my nurse peers to come down with COVID. And she almost passed away. And she survived. And she told me, you do not want this.
No, you don't.
Said, when your time come up, when they send you an email to get your vaccination, I'm going to tell you. She said, it's nothing worse than being a healthcare provider and being critically sick and you can hear everything. And to hear the healthcare team moving